Well, welcome back to another episode of Leaving a Rich Legacy. I'm so excited to have who is Sora Jatun, but you're also a coach and a businesswoman and have so many wonderful things going on. But I'm so excited to have you here with me today because I'm talking about women and for their fertility journeys in honor of my own egg freezing journey. But also, this is a part of the conversations we don't have in the Black and Brown communities. So Leaving a Rich Legacy is basically a love letter to myself, where I'm having conversations with individuals or bringing up topics that I feel like we don't talk about in the Black and Brown community. And fertility is definitely one that I've realized over the last year that it's not that it's on the hush, but we just don't talk about it. So super excited to have you here with us. Dr. Jatun Dorsey, won't you share a little bit about yourself with us today?
Well, first, thank you for having me. I am so elated to come on and not only just join you on your podcast and support you, but to hopefully help some other individuals who may be tuning in. But to your question, who is Dr. Jatun Dorsey? She is many things and many people. But to start out, I'm a speaker, a life and business coach. I'm a professor, a philanthropist, an Amazon bestselling author, and the list goes on and on. But most importantly, I'm a wife and a mother, which was a journey in itself, probably both, but mostly the mother part. But beyond that, I have a nonprofit organization that is catered towards bringing awareness to infertility, to IVF, to surrogacy because of my lived experience. So that was birthed out of that. It was initially known as the Commend Her Network. However, again, because of my experience, I was influenced, encouraged, and empowered to rebirth it. I'll say that, to rebirth it.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about your fertility journey. What did that look like for you?
Oh, goodness. So it started with an unexpected event, and that was a miscarriage. So at the time, we weren't really necessarily, intentionally trying to conceive. However, it occurred. We were planning, to, of course, have children, but didn't have a plan, if that makes sense. So we got married and knew that we wanted a family, but didn't really just set out a specific plan to do so. But it happened, and surprisingly so. I was excited. I was nervous. I was like, oh my goodness, I didn't know this was going to happen so fast. All of those emotions came over me. But soon after, I did have a miscarriage. And at that point, that kind of ignited us to revisit this whole path to parenthood thing. And so upon realizing, that I had a miscarriage and had to go through the process of doing so, it was a DNC, of course. So I had to do that to extract the embryo. So anyway, then at that point, wanted to make sure that everything was okay because I wasn't expecting that. Who does expect it, right? And once it happened, it's like, okay, what do we do now? Is it something that we need to ensure that we are precautious about? Is there anything we need to do as we progress towards this path to parenthood? And so in that journey is when I learned of fibroids that I had. So I knew that I had a couple, and my regular OBGYN always said, I've had many patients who have conceived with fibroids, and yours don't seem to be a problem. So it was never an issue that, was communicated to me or understood by me until that point. So, and that was the only thing that they could really identify. So we kind of targeted those things. And then got to a point to where some other things had come about, like random things during the journey, whether it be polyps or I don't know, just seems like something was always occurring that we didn't know or I didn't plan for. So I had to then redirect my path. And so initially IUI was on the table, explored that, had a great doctor. And then decided, you know what, we don't want to take a chance. It's already going to be expensive either way we go, but what is the least risky avenue to take? And that kind of drove us to the IVF process. And so that's how we got into that. And there's a whole nother part 2, 3, 4, 5 of that, but I'll pause and see if that answers your question or if you have any clarifying questions.
No, well, I will clarify. I would like just for the audience that are listening and watching. But you said a DNC. Can you explain that just for individuals who may not know what that means?
Yeah, so it's really the process of extracting the embryo once it's no longer. So it's most women, I won't say most, I don't know the percentages, but women often pass it naturally, which can be very painful. But there is a procedure where they go in and actually extract it, surgically. And so that was the process that I had to go through. And unfortunately, I had to do it twice for the same situation. But that was the beginning of many more surgeries to come.
Okay. So I know a lot of Black women who, experience fibroids, and it seems the percentage of in the Black and brown community, the number is higher for Black women. But did you have to have your fibroids removed?
Yes, I did that. So I will say during my overall process, it was probably over the duration of 6 to 7 years.
Oh, wow.
A long time to go through this, right? And then during that time, I had over 10 procedures. So that's including, the implantations and the extraction of the eggs, and then the fibroid surgery, which I had 2 of. Maybe they have more than this. And you know what? Let me plug this as well. I am a PhD, not a medical doctor. So don't reach out to me about any medical things specifically. This is my lived experience. I have a PhD. I do the research about this, but I'm not a medical doctor. So I just wanted to plug that. So for the initial process for me, it was a lot because I had to get the fibroids removed. And at that point, in the process, I think we had already done 1 implantation of an embryo. And when it didn't stick, that became, another question mark for us. So what is the problem? What can we do to increase our chances of success? And so again, everything reverted back to the fibroids again. So at that point, we, explored some opportunities for removal of the fibroids and how can what's the option for me to recover quickly? And that is how I came about the robotic surgery, which was the first one that I did for the removal of the fibroids. So robotic surgery is when they make small slits around your belly button. It's typically like 4 or so around your belly button. They kind of cut and use a robotic tool to insert into your stomach to extract the fibroids. And typically you recover much faster from that procedure, which I did. And so after that, you still have a duration of time where the doctor will recommend that you still wait to heal before they are willing to implant another embryo. So there was still a wait period, but it was shorter than, me doing a full-blown fibroid removal surgery. So then after that, did another implant. It didn't stick as well. And so then we went to, okay, might as well take the full-blown surgery, make sure, it's all out. Maybe some others are still there. And so did the full-blown surgery. And of course, again, that took much longer to recover from, more cuts and, more stays at the hospital, all of that. So with the fibroids, that was my experience. I had to have 2 procedures to remove them. And in each instance, it was explained that they can't promise that these won't grow back. There's really no handbook, there's really no diet, there's really nothing that they can offer to you to promise that, those won't grow back. So you may have successful removal of them all. Some may grow back in certain spots, maybe attached to your uterus, maybe it's not. So it's so many different variations of the fibroid experience that could cause detriment to your ability to conceive.
6 to 7 years is a long time.
Very long time.
Yeah.
So imagine the roller coaster, the emotional roller coaster.
Yes, that's what I was going to ask. Tell me about going through that. How did how did you get through that for 6 to 7 years? I mean, you obviously made it through, right? But just talk about that experience on you mentally, emotionally, you know, it could be spiritually as well.
All of that. And don't forget financially. But yeah, I mean, I can laugh about it now only because in hindsight, I know the outcome now. So while you're in that storm though, oh my goodness, it's good to have a circle of people that you can trust for one. Some that may have experienced at least part of what you're experiencing so that they can give you some type of advice or some type of light at the end of the tunnel type story. But even in that, my circle was pretty tight. It wasn't that, I was sharing this with a lot of people. And it was a lot of tough days. And if you know anything about the IVF process, and I know you do, but to those listeners, when you're going through the egg retrieval process, there's like a 2-week period that you're actually giving yourself shots, or whomever is doing it for you. Because I'll tell you, in the beginning, I was like, oh no, I cannot do that. I don't care how small the needle is, how tiny it is to you. I'm not going to be able to do it. But over those 2 weeks, you go into appointments every so often, a couple of days, you have to go into these appointments, and you may get some good news. You may get some bad news. They may say, we need to increase your dosage on a particular medicine. They may say, we need to just stop it because your body is not responding like we want it to. And so just imagine, over that duration of time that we've already discussed, I've had at least 7 or so cycles. And during those 2-week periods, I'm still continuing to work. I'm still continuing my businesses. Life goes on, and you still have to continue to push. And so regardless of whatever the doctor may have reported to me that day, I have to switch that off once I get back into the office and do my job. And so that weighed heavy as well. So it was like, you just have to continue to be positive through it and make sure that you have people, a person, somebody in your circle that can, support you, uplift you, or even just listen to you when you need to vent, or just give you a hug when you're crying, because it gets really rough. And I think that's really what held me up.
Had your family, anyone in your family, ever experienced any infertility issues? Okay.
None that was communicated to me. I'll say maybe not necessarily infertility where they had to do the IVF process, but it was taboo. It wasn't really talked about. Mm-hmm. And even in the instant of me experiencing it, and when I began to share with some of my family members or friends, then more became, shared by some people. And it's like, wait, I never knew that. And so to me in the beginning, it was like, no, I didn't think anyone had experienced it. And the more that I shared, the more that I learned that it was, and that was my point I was making earlier, there may be different people that have experienced different parts of your process, maybe not the full experience that you've had. So for instance, when I had the miscarriage, there was someone in my family that shared that they did, or when I had the IVF process, they're like, oh, I did that. Oh, I didn't even know that, So having those conversations to me is what opened it up. Okay.
Yeah, I do. So I will say, I remember when I shared, I think that was my first night giving myself injections on Facebook, but you were one of the ones who responded. It was like, hey, me and my husband, like we captured some things, we have some conversations. So that's how I found your YouTube channel. But you're right. If you don't mention it, because I felt alone. I was like, I'm alone in this process, but I posted that, and it was you and some others who were like, hey, I went through it. And then there was others who didn't feel comfortable with people knowing, who messaged me separately and talked about it. And, some women do feel ashamed to even share their story, but there are so many who can relate that just don't have the courage yet to talk about it.
That's exactly what I have observed. And many people, even after I shared my story, came to me and they were saying that those exact same words, like, gosh, like, I'm so thankful for you sharing the story, because nobody's talking about this, especially not women that look like me. And so to see that someone else is experiencing it, not only experiencing it, but came out of it and, came out of that storm and is able to share the story is, I think, enlightening for many that feel like it's a daunting process and that there's no no way out, no one that has experienced it, and I'm just here alone. And that could be a rough spot.
So,
Uh-oh.
so you go through the 6 or 7 years, you do have a strong support, and you make it through, and we have a baby. She's the,
I
well, she,
do.
you have a baby. So, how did you get there?
So I got there by way of multiple attempts with IVF and implantation with me that weren't successful. And so at that point, we wanted to make sure that we exhausted all options before we exhausted all embryos. And so the next best thing was to move to surrogacy as an option. And so in that decision at the time, I'm telling you, it was difficult for me because I'm thinking so many different things like why me? You know, you question your womanhood, you question a lot of things, right? But the more I got into it, the more I was receptive to the opportunity and thankful to God that there were options that, you know, I could explore and that we were able to financially, you know, afford, because that is not in a cheap process, I'll say that. So after exploring or deciding upon going with surrogacy, of course, you have an option of doing connecting with an agency, or you can find someone personally that you know, or however you decide to do that outside of an agency. And we attempted to do so outside of an agency, but things didn't quite work out. And so then we shifted into researching agencies and got a few referrals. Of course, if you have a fertility doctor, they can provide you a list of recommended agencies and things of that sort to get you started. And you can go from there doing your research to determine which one you want to go with.
Okay.
And so that's how it went for us. And the way that I like to describe this process, which may have been what I stated when we first shared this story, which through those 6 to 7 years beyond that circle, this was not shared with anyone until the day, I would say the day that she was born, but it was really the day after she was born. So it was kind of like some people were confused, like, wait a minute, I didn't know you were pregnant. Wait, like it was a lot of questions. But yeah, you go through the process with the agency, and it's like a dating process, really. You provide to them your expectations, the things that you would like to see in a potential surrogate. They have questionnaires and things of that sort to get those answers from you. Once they obtain that, then they go into their archive and see who they have in their queue that aligns with your desires. They'll send you a list of those folks, send you their profiles, their pictures, and things of that sort. And you go through and look at the pictures, read the profiles, and you choose some folks that you connect with. Then after that, you go into what they call an interview phase, where you actually kind of like this on a Zoom, especially during COVID for us, you're on a Zoom or you're in person, however you arrange that. And you just have a conversation and see how, you know, you feel each other out. It's kind of like a fit interview. Are we fit for each other? And you decide after that call, you have a certain amount of time. Both parties have to agree and respond to the agency to say whether or not they're interested in working with the other party. And so once that's settled, then you get into all of the rigmarole, which is contracting, you know, pricing and all of that stuff. So it's a rigorous process, a lot of legalities, things that you have to consider, I would say would be, you know, you have to do counseling. Both parties have to do counseling. You have to have an attorney for both parties as well. You have to, you know, cover certain things for the surrogate, of course, like life insurance, child care if they have children, hospital bills, things of that sort. So all of that stuff adds up. So it's definitely a process, but that is how we kind of shifted after our experience with the implantations. We shifted to exploring other options, and surrogacy was one of them.
So you said a lot of people really didn't know. It was the surprise. What was that decision like to keep it kind of intimate and didn't share that with a lot of people?
For me, it was good because that's kind of how I roll anyway. So it wasn't really an adjustment for me. And plus, you're so deep into the experience and it's so emotional, it's so taxing that it's like you don't want to engage too many people, because I think of it like this: if they really care, they're going to be reaching out and they're going to want to know the latest updates. And you're going to have to keep reliving these stories every day, every week they're calling. And so I had to keep that in mind too. Like, if the tighter I keep this circle, the less I have to repeat and relive these things in the moment that I'm already like dealing with. And so I think that was part of the thing that helped me, like just keeping that circle tight. And, you know, I think after a little bit of time, those people that were engaged, they began to truly understand it, because they, you know, like we said earlier, a lot of people don't really know much about IVF or surrogacy even. And so most of the concern was just, what is it? You know, first, explain to me what this is. What does it mean? Is it your child? You know, it was those types of questions, right? And so, and I think that reminds me, I was saying earlier, and I threw myself off, but I was going to say one of the examples that I used when I was describing this experience after we, you know, shared the information that our baby girl was born, is that people just, they truly did not understand surrogacy. And so I said, just think of it this way. If you are, and this was around the holidays, so this is how it came to mind, this analogy. So I was like, just think about it in a way of, you know, you're having a potluck. You got invited to someone's house. They gave you a particular item to bring. We'll say it's a baked good. And you can either, you know, mix all of the ingredients at home, put it in your own oven, bake it, and then bring it. Or you can mix it with your ingredients at home, take it to their house and bake it in their oven. Or you can just go buy one from the store, right? The buy one from the store is like it until adoption. The mix my ingredients at the house and then bake it in your oven is the surrogacy process that we had, right? And then you can also, the natural state, mix the ingredients and bake it at your house. So that was kind of the analogy I used to explain this to them. So as to say, this is both me and my husband. We just put the bun in somebody else's oven to carry it for us. So I think people began to really understand it then, because even once I shared the information, you know, on social, many people were like, oh, I can relate, I adopted, or I, you know, had an egg donor. It's like, that's not what this is though. I'm glad for you and your lived experience. I just want to be honest and true. This is a little different. So that was a part of the story for us, I guess, that kind of held me together too, that I was able to still have, you know, the baby have a part of both of us. So just had to get over the part of me being able to carry. But the thing that I think helped me with that is just thinking about, you know, maybe God was protecting me from something that perhaps my body couldn't do or couldn't press through. So I had to, you know, look at things in a different light and not just continue to ask, why me?
You're absolutely right, right? It would have been a life-threatening experience, right?
Yeah.
So it worked out the way that it was supposed to.
Absolutely.
Even though you have to educate people sometimes.
I know. Still am sometimes. So
Yes, but it is. And it like you said earlier too, and that's the one thing I want women and others to realize: we have options. And you chose to do what was best for you. You know, you tried everything, right? You tried multiple things, and that was the option that you decided on. And that's an option that, you know, financially it can be, you know, expensive, but if the person can, you know, financially it's cost effective, then they have that option as well too.
Exactly.
No one tells us how to, you know, how to get where we want to. So that's really good. So you talked about your fertility position, and I just want to ask you about this because I think it's so important that you have a good relationship with your fertility physician. Did you have the same fertility specialist throughout your 6 or 7 years, or did you change?
I changed. I probably had 3 doctors. The first change was not by choice. It was due to insurance. You know, your insurance typically has what's in network and what's out of network type situation. So you kind of adjust in that perspective. But for the majority of my experience, it was the same doctor. So that was important because you don't want to have to keep retelling the story and then relearning your situation and things of that sort. So that was kind of the goal in that perspective. And then even in those situations, even when they do know you, you still have to know yourself better. And what I mean by that is continue to push, ask questions, make sure that you get the attention that you want, because, you know, of course, they have many other clients and patients, so they may not be thinking all the way through some of the things that you may be thinking and considering, or maybe they can help you think through and better understand some things that are concerning you that maybe, you know, you could take off your shoulder. One less thing to worry about. I would rather ask the doctor than to just continue to, you know, go day to day, not knowing and wondering and worrying.
Yeah, I think the relationship with the doctor is important.
It is.
So that's good. I know I tried to reach out to a different doctor, and the customer service was horrible. And I was like, just imagine actually going through the process. And if I'm feeling this way and I'm emotional, then I just can't imagine how I would feel if I didn't have a good relationship.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's good to have, you know, those relationships with their nurses and other, you know, coordinators and all of that, because sometimes you can't talk to the doctor, but you still want to have, to your point, that good bedside manner type experience that makes you feel warm and want to continue to do the process with that particular clinic.
Yeah, you're right. Because I know I probably just wore my nurse out. I was emailing her all the time.
But when you got one that's you know, that you built a relationship with, I don't think they mind.
Oh, no, not. And she was really good. So I think that's important. So thinking about the surrogacy process, like, was there anything specifically that when you thought about a surrogate, right? So now you're accepting this option in the next steps, but like going in and looking at different candidates, was there anything specifically that you were adamant on that you wanted your surrogate to have?
So I was very particular, but again, that's not unusual. But I would say like the top things for me was health. So just considering their status from a health perspective, and then where they resided, because I wanted to be a part of the process. So I wanted to make sure they weren't too far in another state, but, you know, if we had to, we would, you know, make arrangements to do so to accommodate that. But ideally wanted someone that was close so that I could attend appointments and things of that sort if and when I could. And then also, you know, just success rate. I'll sum it up to that, success rate, because some of the surrogates may be what they call veterans. So they may have done it several times and had multiple success stories, but then you have some that have never done it before, but then you have to look through again, their health and all that stuff to determine, you know, the likelihood of them being able to carry. So those three things I'll say were like top of mind for me: their health, success rate, and then where they reside.
For the families or women who want to consider surrogate, or there may be their only option right now, are you aware of any programs that assist with surrogacy?
I don't know any programs, and I'll say that what I'm going to mention is not specific to the full surrogacy process, but a lot of organizations, corporate organizations, are now incorporating that into their benefits, for one. So they'll do reimbursements up to a certain amount, and it could only be a particular type of expense. So I think it's like, you know, medical expenses or medicines or things of that sort, but they'll outline it for your particular organization. So if you have insurance and you're with a corporation, look into that for sure. And then with your medicines, there are different rebates and organizations or opportunities within those organizations that you can apply for depending on your income, that you can get discounts on the medicines and things of that sort. So it's like little pockets, I'll say, of opportunities depending on what part of the process that you're in.
Okay, well, that's good. You know, I know that they have the grants or different programs that will help with medication.
Right.
Now with my medication for the IVF process, and you have to meet certain criteria, but with surrogacy, that's good to know there is some type of help. And companies are actually changing the support that they have, because I think that's a huge, I'm in a part of some support groups on Facebook, and some of these companies are paying for like everything. And then you
I've
see
heard.
others, they're like, no, or I've seen some women even say they switched organizations to
Just
go to
to
an
pay.
organization that will support them. So I
Yeah.
think that's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's, to your point, a rather new thing, and then it seems like the CEOs of these organizations must be talking, or the HR directors, because it's definitely spreading, and it's becoming more and more prominent in the organizations. I think, one of our surrogates had mentioned that the company that she worked for, as she had done it so many times, they didn't really know. They just thought she was pregnant for her husband. And so she just had a random conversation with HR, and that's what ignited that company to start looking into it. Like, oh, this is a thing. Like, women are really experiencing this, and perhaps we need to explore it. And that's kind of how it started at her organization. And so, I mean, I say that to say, maybe if it's not at your company and you don't want to move, maybe have that conversation so that you can be that beacon of light to start it.
That's good. And that's interesting that one of the surrogates you spoke with has done it multiple times. So they've helped either the same family or multiple families with the process. So that's awesome. That's awesome. So your daughter,
yes,
is she 2?
She's 1.
1. Okay.
Yeah. She'll be 2 in October.
Okay. So your daughter's here. You have to kind of go through this process in COVID. And when she was born, what was that like for you? Just that experience?
So I was nervous. I was scared. I was kind of like lost as well, because again, through this whole process, there wasn't like a roadmap. There wasn't anyone that had gone through it or shared their experience. So this whole thing was new for me. So I'm learning as I'm going as well, right? And so I think it was a blessing, I'll say, to be able to have been there for the whole experience. And, it just really depends on your relationship with your surrogate, how open they are, what you all agreed to legally, and all of those things that lead up to that day. And so being able to be in that room with her the entire time was awesome. So I was like, girl, I had to have a real conversation with her. I said, girl, thank you. I mean, there were no words I could say to her after experiencing her birth that child for me. I say that child, my baby, for me. And I'm like, I just couldn't even imagine the pain. But it was good to be there to soothe her, to do whatever she needed to make sure she was comfortable, things of that sort. So it was a great experience. One that I will never forget. Definitely tried to document as much as I could without making her feel uncomfortable, but she was comfortable with everything. But I was still in my, thoughts like, if that was me, I don't know. So I still had to keep that in mind. But the overall experience was beautiful. And the hospital, it was very interesting, I guess, with the hospitals, because you have to keep reiterating, not everyone understood or knew that it was a surrogate type situation. So you have to continue to kind of communicate that, because after the baby's born, they typically give it to the mom to do the skin to skin. And if they don't know that, nurses are trying to give it to the surrogate, and she's like, no, don't give it to, it's like all of that kind of going on, and you have to, be mindful of that and making sure everyone is on the same page. But I'll say for the most part, everything went smoothly. It was beautiful.
Okay. I was wondering about the skin to skin. So you even got not only be there, but you were able to experience that as well.
Yes. Yep. Definitely. That was an important part for me. So that came pretty shortly after she was born, of course, but they do the weighing and all of that stuff. So I was able to kind of hold her through that process and help them clean her and cut the umbilical cord, everything. So I was very engaged in the process.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Wow, that's exciting. That is. So for any woman who maybe, hesitating about surrogacy And it's just the thought of another woman carrying their child, or it could be outside sources, right? We have people who don't understand, who love to share their opinions. But do you have any encouraging words for that woman?
Yeah, I would say continue to be hopeful. It could get very daunting. It could get very heavy. It can sometimes feel like there's no resolve. And then you can also at some point feel kind of beat yourself up because it's not going how you wanted it to go, or as quickly as you wanted it to go. But be open, mostly, not only just be hopeful, but be open to the possibilities, be open to the opportunities, be open to sharing with, folks that you trust, so that you can then glean from maybe their experiences and know that you do have, one, the support, and two, someone who has probably lived through that and can share some of their advice as well that may help guide you through your process. But I just say keep your head up, because it's not easy, especially, if you have to deal with it or go through it, or, navigate the terrains alone, or if you have to deal with the emotional roller coaster. As you said earlier, spiritually, financially, emotionally, all of that is going to kind of hit you like a tornado. So just having your balance and having your support group is very important.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I think that it's going to be important for a lot of women who are on the journey, right, and have been for a few years and may be ready to give up. But out of this experience, you've been able to identify a purpose, which I don't know, was this something you thought about before? Could have been, because you're doing a lot, right, to give. But out of your experience, you've been able to birth something as well.
Yeah.
You kind of mentioned that earlier.
Yes.
But so I know briefly, just how did you get there, right? So you've gone through this experience, your daughter's here, you've gone through 6-7 years, and then now you're able to help others.
Yeah. And I think that's the key, is helping others, because again, me going through the process, there was no guiding principle to really help me navigate through it. And so it was just kind of a trial and error. It was, asking questions, Googling, asking doctors. It was just a lot to do and to maneuver. And so throughout the process, I was just, always thinking, how can I help someone else that's going through this? Now, granted, in the process, I'm like, let me help myself get out of this first. But I'm just like, why isn't there this? Why isn't there that to help, to guide you through it? And so, I continue, that stayed on my mind continually. And then after the process, my thought was, I already have a nonprofit organization. Maybe I need to repurpose that to where it focuses more in this arena, to where we can, bring awareness, that we can possibly offer funding, create support groups, and then, also just create an environment to where women they don't feel like they have to be in a hidden place while they're going through this experience, whether you have to do IUI or IVF or adoption or whatever it is. But knowing that it's okay to have a non-traditional path to parenthood. But the organization was initially the Commend Her Network, and it is now known as Wombs in Waiting, because we have so many women out there who are trying to conceive. Their wombs are waiting to conceive, but their stories just vary. So just want to create the hope that I had and I continue to have.
So Wombs in Waiting, that's a unique name. So did it just come to you, or was it something that you had to kind of sit on? So you had one name at first, but like that transition, was it like an aha moment?
Well, so the initial name, goodness, that's been since 2015, that organization. So it had I won't say completely different purpose, but it was nothing along these lines. It was more geared towards bringing women together and camaraderie, networking, and things of that sort. Which served its purpose and served its time. But again, I knew that my purpose was different, and I had gone through many different things since the inception of the original nonprofit organization. And so, like I said, throughout my experience, I was like always thinking, how can I help someone else that's going through this? Like maybe I need to document my experience. Maybe I need to share, my experience, just thinking of ways that I can do that. And of course, the documentation happened, and this is actually my first, let me say this is my first time discussing this off of my platform onto someone else's. So kudos to you. But like doing more things like this to help other women. And I wanted to make sure that, those things that I serve through my philanthropy is in alignment with my experience and in alignment with my purpose. And that's how I came to that. But the title, the name, that kind of hit me one day. And yes, I still sat on it for a long time because I'm like, let me make sure. Let me see if God tells me something different. But it definitely settled, and it felt like it definitely describes the purpose.
Okay. Well, I thank you so much for being here today and just sharing your story. And I hope that there's a woman that may see some of herself in you, right? Because you wear many hats. And we don't always wear the same hats, but at one point we may wear a similar hat. And I hope that there's a woman who's inspired and motivated just based on your story and you being vulnerable to share that with us today. But is there anything else that you would like to share about you or your journey that you would like to leave us off with?
I say, again, I want to encourage those women out there, men, couples, families, whomever, that, just stay the course. We never know what the outcome may be. Throughout my experience, I was, often questioning, do I keep trying or do I stop? Or, you hit those walls where you're thinking, is God telling me to stop, or is he saying keep going and you just got to open a different door? So just be patient with yourself. Be kind to yourself, take care of yourself through the process, but make sure that you are well informed of your options so that you'll know should you continue or not. And then just keeping in mind that life goes on, right? So we have to continue to push through the process and continue to go to work, continue to take care of our families and things of that sort. So just can't reiterate taking care of yourself more than anything, because that could also hinder the process as well. So take care of yourself and keep the hope.
Yeah. Self-care. So I'm a huge self-care advocate. So yeah, you're right. You still got to take care of yourself in the process. But you have a lot of things going on. You pour into people, and I definitely want to share, how can some of the viewers follow you, can reach out to you, whether that's through social media or different platforms?
Yeah, you can reach me on Instagram at Dr. Jatun, DRJATUN. My handle is actually the same on Facebook and Twitter and TikTok as well. So that's probably the easiest way to connect with me, or you can email me at jatun@drjatun.com.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jatun Dorsey. I appreciate you sharing your story and look forward to following you and as you continue to help more people. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.